The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I'm excited to have a friend of mine and a neighbor with us today, David Sauvage. Hi, David. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Beth.
We were just talking about how, David's last name, Sauvage, I said French. And then there I am. After spending 12 years of my upbringing studying French, I can barely pronounce someone's last name.
You're doing fine. You didn't do Sauvage, which is really nice. I think if people just avoid Sauvage or worse, sausage, I feel okay. So.
David Sauvage would be a great last name. I don't know.
There's a journalist out there with that name that I occasionally get confused with.
Oh my God. Too funny. Journalist. Yeah, I want to hear about this because you also just mentioned you're in the midst of writing a book, but we'll get into this in a little bit. So David is a guide who teaches, performs, and embodies emotional intelligence. He has a deep practice with plant medicine as well. And, we have some interconnections just being in the New York area and including clients and friends and people in our community. And then I finally got a chance to meet you at an incredible dinner where you were one of the facilitators. And it was kind of like a dream come true dinner of connecting in community. And we had some great conversations. And I said, you have to come on to my podcast. So here we are. David, tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get to where you are today? And I'm always curious, what was your programming like growing up as a kid? Were you kind of on the path to being a corporate attorney in New York City, like a lot of people, or were you just always interested in the human condition and emotional intelligence?
I want to say both. I was both in some ways on the path to being a corporate attorney and also always interested in the human condition. Being a corporate attorney, however, was not really what I was interested in. I was most interested growing up professionally in being a writer. And to me, a writer, when I was in my teenage years and into my 20s, a writer wasn't just somebody who went deep into what they thought and felt and communicated it as powerfully as possible. That's not what I wanted. A writer was somebody who was recognized for their genius in writing and then was paid for that genius and given lots of plaudits for that genius. So what I really wanted as a teenager and into my 20s was to be a well-recognized, well-compensated writer. The best thing that could have happened to that kid would have been something like a Tony Award for Best New Play or an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. There was an authentic strand in me that was genuinely interested in storytelling, genuinely interested in putting words to human experience, and genuinely interested in the human experience. But I didn't have another model other than to prostitute those deep skills in the marketplace, first of New York theater, which is barely a marketplace, and then in the other marketplace of Hollywood, which is basically a devil's feeding ground on creative expression. So those two through lines, this authentic desire to understand and articulate truth about the human condition and a much shallower and wound originating need to be seen and compensated for swam together until my early 30s. And my writing career didn't quite work out, and I pivoted into directing. So in my mid to late 20s, I started directing documentaries and commercials, and I had more success on one level than I had had as a writer. I was working for years as a commercial director, and then I made a few documentaries, very, very short documentaries that came from the right place, that came from my heart. But even in my directing career, I was falling short both in the sense of not making enough money to sustain myself, or intermittently making enough money to sustain myself, and then not receiving the recognition I was so craving, probably because I wasn't in my truest gift, which was writing. And then there was another thread we have to pull in, which is just decades-long depression. I was in the story that my depression was originating from my lack of success. I was in the story that the real problem was that I wasn't being paid well enough, or I wasn't being appreciated for my gifts, and therefore I was depressed. And it was largely thanks to plant medicine, largely thanks to ayahuasca, that I was shown that story was way too convenient and simple, and that the depression feels like a tame word. The decades-long combination of misery and self-hatred that was animating so much of my psychology was not rooted in something so simple as me not selling screenplays. That the traumas that were giving rise to that pain were much deeper, rooted in childhood and rooted in generational trauma. And through that work, I discovered and then embraced and then cultivated an ability to really feel what was going on in myself, and then also what was going on in others. And this innate capacity became something of a journey to explore. So I started to really get into what it is to feel feelings, what it is to feel my own feelings, and then also what it is to feel other people's feelings, and also what it is for other people to feel their feelings. And that matched up with my long-standing interest in the human condition and deepened it. And I realized that this desire that I had to feel my feelings, feel other people's feelings, had a creative impulse in it too. I started to do performance art with it, which I can get into if you want. And then I started to teach it. What is it to have a healthy relationship with one's emotions? And then organically, I would help people navigate it for themselves. And that's sort of where I am now.
Wow. That's an amazing story, and there's definitely some gems I want to touch on. And I actually do want to hear about your performance art, because I heard a little bit about one of them the night that we met, and I was like floored by it, because, you know, it seems like something so relevant, but then we got into the topic of, money. Like, there's no money to be made in human connection, like feelings and community and gathering places. But yeah, do you want to share a little bit about the performance art and how it's kind of evolved?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's no money to be made in feelings and connection and community. I think there is money to be made in feelings and connection and community, but making money doing work that is sacred and sincere is very tricky. So it's not that there's a tension between making money, helping people with their feelings, like that's what whole industries are based on, or gathering people in community. That's what whole industries are based on. The tension is much deeper and subtler, is that can we be in authentic relationship with yourself, with myself, you in authentic relationship with yourself, us in authentic relationship with each other, with money in that flow. And I would say that that is where all the tension is. I think we'll come back to that, and I'll rewind to the performance art piece. I had this vision once that I would sit on a stage of some kind and tell people what they were feeling. And I started doing it. So I put 2 chairs. First it was in an art gallery, and then eventually it turned into yoga studios and Burning Man, and then eventually it turned into theaters. So I 2 chairs on the stage. I sit in one of them. I invite somebody, a volunteer usually. Sometimes I call on people. That's fun. But usually a volunteer from the audience to come sit with me. Close my eyes. I ask for their hand. And then I allow their feelings into my body. Like I relax into my experience of their experience. And then I describe what it is I feel they're feeling. And I also enact their feelings with my body. So I allow my body to express the emotions I sense they're having. And then after the readings, I give them an opportunity to tell me and the audience, to the best of their ability, sometimes they're just shell-shocked, what that was like for them. So it's an exploration of the fluidity of feelings, how they move from one to the other. It's a kind of psychic performance art, and it's an invitation to folks who have similar gifts to play with them more. And it's an opportunity for people who are really disconnected from their emotions to see what connection might look like, what might be going on down there. And it's also a place for people who are skeptical of things supernatural to be tested.
And I can assume you're usually like correct, meaning the person's like, wow, how did you know that I felt that way? I mean,
yeah, usually is the right word. And when I'm not correct, or whether there's like a tension between what I'm saying and what they feel is true about themselves, that's a rich place of tension. Am I projecting? Am I feeling something about them that is not true? And what is it in me that's giving rise to that projection? And do I have the maturity to own that or not? Or are they in some kind of denial about their experience? And how do we navigate that? So that becomes like a really rich place of tension that I enjoy exploring.
Wow. Sounds like a medicine space to me. How do you, I'm curious, because I've always been really hypersensitive and empathic. And, the last 5 to 10 years, I think I've gotten really good at trying to manage this, where I'm not taking on too much or holding the feelings of others too much, where I'm also taking care of my needs and myself. But how do you, because, especially for a lot of space holders listening to this is a common, thing that comes up. How do you sit with someone, feel their feelings, let them flow through you, but not, let's say ruin your day or even week or month, or affect you too much? Or is the path about letting it affect you too much and just letting it flow through? I'm curious what your process is for that.
It's complicated. I would say the most important thing here is the degree to which other people's emotions tend to get stuck in us is the degree to which we process and allow our own emotions or not. So if I'm feeling anger, or if I have anger in me and I'm not feeling it, I'm disconnected from it, I don't want to feel it, and then I'm in a space with somebody who's feeling anger, my anger serves as an attractor for their anger. Their anger enters me. It connects up with my disowned anger. Now I am angrier, and there is a mishmash of my own anger and their own anger. And since I am in denial of my anger, I now become more passive-aggressive, more bitter, and relationships are fraying in my life because of somebody else's anger in my space. But all of that is because I haven't learned how to process my own anger. If, on the other hand, my relationship with anger is really healthy and I invite it through me and I give it expression in safe ways and I encounter somebody who's angry, then it's real easy for that anger to flow right through me.
I think you've just defined like all of humanity right now, right? Because I've actually been exploring this myself lately around why are people just so mean, or why is there road rage, or why is it that I go to New York City for 10 minutes and the cab driver is saying like people are driving like maniacs all of a sudden, which I thought they always were, but and I'm like, what's happening in humanity? Like, I actually had this conversation a week ago about the amount of unprocessed rage that is like bottling up inside, and it's probably beyond rage. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's just the survival of being a human on Earth right now. Do you think that this is something that humanity is going to be able to learn, or there's potential for us to learn how to live in this really divided world, but somehow not rage at people on the road constantly, or cut each other off, or constantly be yelling at people on social media?
Well, I think most of the time, I used anger as an example, but I think for what you're talking about, where there's anger is permeating the field, there's a degree to which people are just angry and it needs to come out. But I actually don't think that's what's going on. I think for the most part, anger is a much more bearable emotional experience than fear or terror. And so I think what's really going on underneath the anger is a degree of unsafety and fear that very few of us can even touch, let alone express to others, let alone be held in. And so that dissociated anger, that dissociated fear gives rise to an unending anger, an unquenchable anger, because it never actually gets to the root thing that's going on. Which,
in my theory, and maybe yours and a lot of people I've interviewed, is this disconnection. This deeper disconnection that we have from Earth, from ourselves, from spirit, from, maybe larger meaning, or, just like a complete and total disconnection, which seems to be this pandemic of the world that we're in today. And I don't know, it comes up a lot because this is one thing, let's say maybe the plant medicines can help us find again, or find this kind of a always inherently here, yet like the core wound of all of humanity, disconnection from source. I'm curious, what are your views on that as someone who, works with medicine and works with others in this kind of depths of exploration with their emotions? Is this what you think might be like the kind of core wounding of what's happening here on Earth?
Yes. But I don't think that frame helps us that much. So I think I agree that at the root of everything is some fundamental disconnection. And I agree that plant medicine helps us reconnect. However, I would say what feels more alive in me is the idea that most people are in excruciating pain because they've never felt seen or understood by their parents. So if you can sit with that fact, like how many of us listening in the audience or in the world have really felt fully seen and held and understood by our parents, that we could return to a safe space that no matter what was going on within us, we were held right there. Vanishingly small percentage of human beings can relate to what I just said. So then I feel into that sense, that gap between all of the children out there and all of the parents out there, and my inner child and all of the parents who are in their child trying and mostly failing to meet the children they brought into the world, that wound feels like the palpable pulsing wound that is running through humanity that is a symptom of the larger disconnection. Or maybe another symptom of the larger disconnection is how many of us have felt, maybe a lot of us listening to this podcast, but vanishingly small percentage of humans on this earth have felt fully held and related to the natural world. Like how many of us have been on a vision quest walking through the woods for a week until we surrendered to our connection. How many of us have been in an ecstatic sense of communion with the divine through plant medicine or through sex or through authentic relating. So yes, the disconnection is the thing, but all of the forms of the disconnection are where the life force needs to be returned to. And my somewhat reluctance to looking at it through the meta lens of disconnection is that often elides the actual wounding that we can actually feel. So when I go into spaces where people are talking about the meta problem, I feel the disconnection in the space itself and an unwillingness generally to actually engage in the felt sense of that disconnection in order to enjoy talking about the higher order problem.
Wow. Yeah. And it's hard, right? It's like,
So
it's hard work to go in and feel that ultimate pain. I mean, that's something I've been, I think it's like unintentionally exploring the last few years, but especially the last 9 months, where a lot of all of my journeys, I'll be honest, all of my journeys have been into like the utter pain and grief and darkness and just like because I actually set an intention. Like I want to go all the way down, all the way in, as painful as it is to feel. Like I actually spent a whole ceremony asking, like, why do we all hate ourselves so much? Like, why do I hate myself? Which I don't feel like I did maybe 20 years ago, but I wanted to experience like that ultimate feeling and see what was there. And I actually had to, I could feel myself wanting to avoid and leave because it's much easier to just switch gears and go see some funky colors or angels. But instead, I just kept going down the tunnel until it was like the hardest feeling to feel ever. But, I actually did find like light there, and it sounds so kind of cheesy and generic, but to actually like embody that experience and feel it. And then, by the way, go there again and again and again. It's been interesting, but I can see where the shift inside of my experience is like, okay, not to say I feel totally safe on earth, but I feel safer than ever. I feel much more held and surrendered and trusting in the process. But, and I think there's a lot enmeshed in that, as you say. It's like being fully seen and feeling safe, that initial wounding, if our life force or caregivers weren't there holding us in like safety, because of course they have so much generational trauma that's been passed down. There's like, it's, it just seems to be never ending. Then how can we even feel safe or happy or thriving here on earth, like making a living or, functioning out in the world? So I actually really like this theory, but then it's kind of like, well, do we just blame our parents? Because we can't, right? We can't. It's like, my parents, I know, did the best they could, but they had so much trauma themselves. And of course, they didn't really do anything to process through that at all. And then I go back into generation after generation, and I can just see like, oh, well, that. And it's like, well, it was no one's fault. But, is there hope for maybe some kind of like healing of this in the future? I don't know. I mean, I have a prayer. It's probably wishful thinking, but...
Well, you asked a question rhetorically, can we blame our parents? And your answer was no, because it goes back generations. And my answer is yes. And that blaming our parents is a necessary step along the path, and a very, very, very difficult one. And it doesn't mean, to blame them does not ultimately mean that it is their fault. So saying ultimately it's not their fault because, maybe for us, the Holocaust or whatever the Jewish trauma is that runs through us, like, yes, that is not their fault. And yet there was a kid in me who was not tended to the way he needed to be. And that kid does not need to be told it's not their fault. That kid actually needs to say, where are you, Dad? Where are you, Mom? What is happening here? And for him to grow up, there's a healthy place for blame. And then through the blame, we arrive at the more mature conclusion that there are generations of wounding here, and then there can be forgiveness. Mm-hmm. But I think most of us are too scared to actually hold our parents responsible because these generational traumas carry with them these energies that prevent us from fully pointing out the darkness that they are. So it's to really say that was messed up is so threatening and scary to most family systems that we skip out of it and say, well, it's not their fault because they were abused too. Mm-hmm. And then we have actually continued to allow this dark force to perpetuate, which is one of the major pitfalls of most medicine communities, most spiritual communities, is an extremely unhealthy and avoidant relationship to blame and responsibility.
That's, yeah. Oh my God. We have to do a whole separate podcast about that because I've actually been really diving into that recently too, just to experience like how much, and again, it's kind of like, I don't know anybody getting it right. I mean, I'm sure maybe someone's out there, but how much spiritual bypass there is even in the medicine community or even within people who are quite experienced with medicine or even people that serve medicine. It's been interesting. I have friends like this, and to witness it. But then, again, it's like, I really feel like if everybody's at least doing something to constantly be evolving and looking at themselves, maybe it's just the nature of being human. Even my own curandera, who I was with a week ago, I brought up something about the phones because I was in the middle of nowhere in Peru and there was still a lot of phones present. And one of the reasons I like going there is to avoid the phones. And I named it in an integration circle. And even she said, she was telling a story about seeing a hummingbird on a chacruna leaf when she was harvesting it. And then she had this desire to take a photo with her phone. And I was like, whoa, even you who lives out here in the middle of nowhere, who lives this very simple, amazing life and just, is someone who I think of as this like holier than thou person. Even she has like her stuff around presence and phone and being human and functioning in our time. And so, it's an interesting thing to explore, especially, people that are holding space for a lot of people at this higher level. But I want to get into something because when we were talking before we got on, I want to get into this other topic around money. Because this is actually, I think, all tied in together. Because, right, topic. It always is. Well, you had mentioned, we had mentioned like gifts, sharing gifts, and then also this felt sense of safety being human on earth, right? And then you bring in all the upbringing and the generational trauma. And, I've seen this pattern running in a lot of my clients. Like there's different patterns around the family of like, being successful, pleasing the parent, feeling guilty. I mean, I went through this, like feeling guilty about changing my career and going after what I wanted, like what will my family think? I'm going to be disowned. And then you throw money in all of it. And let's get into this a little bit more, especially people working in the medicine space. There's a lot of therapists, people who serve medicine, people who do underground work, coaches, people, that's a lot of the people in the audience. And there's a lot of heat around, accepting money for this kind of helping sacred work. And everybody, I think, is aware that we need to accept money because it's part of our system. And for the most part, most people need money to, survive. But then there's heat when it comes to how much and how do we do it? And, this is, I'm helping, I'm healing. How can I accept money for this? What are your views on trying to get this balance right of like thriving and accepting money, but also, doing something that's like coming through you that wants to serve others and help, be of service on the planet?
Maybe my favorite question in the world. Probably might be my favorite question in the world because I feel like working toward answering it is charting new territory in the human psyche. So first I'm going to feel like bringing up all the answers that we're used to giving, none of them being satisfying. So one extremely unsatisfying answer is, of course I have to charge. I need money to live. Mm-hmm. And that's an answer I sometimes come to myself with this work, but there's a hollowness to it or a crudeness to it. And it's very hard to stay fully in your heart when you're inside the I need money to live. In other words, I am scared that if I don't have money, I will not be able to live. And from that place of fear, I am asking you to give me money or charging you money. But I am not owning the degree to which fear is driving me. I am inside a false narrative that what is driving me is nothing but love or a desire to serve. And so I am in a dishonest, disingenuous relationship with the person I am serving because what is motivating me largely is this fear. But what I am presenting as motivating me and what I'm asking them to buy into is this much more beautiful sense of healing and connection. And in that deception is so much shadow, and that shadow permeates everything. That shadow permeates everything. That shadow is the shadow of marketing, period, writ large. But it's really, really evident as shadow in spaces where deep and authentic connection is what we are presenting ourselves as wanting. But if we're really wanting money, that is a very different thing. Another extremely unsatisfying answer is that when you simply align with your truest purpose, money will come.
I say this sometimes. It's not true, though.
So tell me more about why you say it and why.
No, because I do believe in the alignment. I don't believe that it's that simple, though. Because by the way, there are coaches out there who I know are making millions selling how easy it is to just be in the energetic alignment. And by the way, I think they're scam artists because one of them scammed me. So I say it and I follow up with like the truth of the world that we live in, which is we have to be in this balance. And I do believe like we can't bypass the fact that money exists and marketing exists and reaching people, especially, let's say online businesses where someone dreams of having, the online life and serving people all over the world. I'm like, well, you have to have a way to reach human beings. Because the chances that you're going to get multiple clients finding you while you're sitting at home doing nothing is very slim, even if you're in the right energetic soul alignment with your purpose. So it's not 100% true.
I'm glad.
Maybe a little. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, there are many a coach who make a lot of money helping people align with the frequency that will make them a lot of money. And it is true that there is a frequency that you can align with that will make you a lot of money. There is such a frequency, and there are masters at aligning with that frequency. And that frequency is not at all the frequency of love. That frequency, the perfect embodiment of that frequency is Tony Robbins.
Wow. Yeah. Because there's always a shadow. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about.
There is a frequency that money follows, but that frequency is not the frequency of universal compassion. That frequency is not the frequency of joyful creative expression. That frequency is not the frequency of deeply erotic connection between people. all of those frequencies are operating very differently than the frequency at which money operates. And those frequencies are aligned with a deeper flow. Those frequencies are aligned with authentic connection. So if you are connected with your, let's say, artistic spirit, and you're a dancer, and you have learned to move your body in ways that are fully true for you, and you are fully expressive in your gifts as a dancer, it is an open question whether money will find you. And if it does, money's going to find you with some strings. Come, take your beautiful, amazing dance practice and put it inside this box, and make sure you give 10% of that to this person who tells you to do that thing. And now we're in this story of the prostitution of the great gift inside the sacrilegious and idolatrous economy that is money. And so that dancer who is fully embodying herself is connecting more truthfully to herself, and that will allow her to connect more truthfully to others. That will put her in touch with the flow of natural resources in the world. That will connect her with nature, and there is an abundance that wants to flow to her by virtue of her connection with her truest self. That abundance does not move through the world in the form of money. Money and abundance have become synonyms because we are too scared to tease them apart. Money is much closer in its energy to power or control, and it has within it much more fear than love. And that's why the people who have more and more and more money, on the whole, tend to be more and more and more disconnected from people, and also more and more fearful of relating in authentic ways, and more distrustful, and more in illusion.
And controlling.
And it's really, really hard to say these things. It takes so much maturity to be able to say these things without rage or without fear, because we are all so dependent on people who have a lot of money to make money ourselves for our survival. And so we, again and again, enable all of the mistreatment that tends to co-occur with money so that we don't cut ourselves off from that. And that's the lie that most of us get stuck in. That's the lie that keeps the entire system working. And it's so hard to untangle because our survival is built on us enabling that lie, continuing that lie. And so the answer is so the answer that we give, just align with your highest purpose and money will follow, is mostly bullshit. It's align with your gifts and figure out how to sell them in the marketplace while disconnecting from those parts of you that know that marketing isn't true to your soul. That's the formula that most people are following to make a lot of money.
I actually purposely do not teach. I actually say it all the time that I don't believe in I'm digressing a little, but because there is a common theme for people out there to teach certain methodologies and certain ways, and there's cookie cutter strategies, and it's I've already proven it multiple times that it doesn't work that way. So then why would anyone do that? And it's I teach a way where it's okay, well, what do you enjoy? You enjoy writing? Okay, well, here's a way to maybe make it effective in the 3D world, but not in a way where it's okay, go do something you hate because it's been known to get you more clients. I don't do that, and I don't teach that because it's, it doesn't actually work, by the way. Maybe it works for some people a little bit, but then it just
works
burns
to the
them
degree
out.
to which you can disconnect from yourself. Which is what money is regularly teaching us to do. So I think the answer is the answer to your question is basically collectively we're not there yet. We're not at a place where there is a balance to be found between authentic expression and financial security. That we are compelled to make a whole bunch of conscious or unconscious compromises that are deeply toxic and perpetuate the disconnection we have from ourselves and each other. And the work is to feel and own those disconnections and the pain of them until collectively we can stand for a world without money. Until collectively we can stand for authenticity and need and love being the drivers of resource generation and flow, instead of fear and anxiety and whatever other needs money appears to be meeting. And that work is ultimately collective and not individual. And this is the last point I'll make, and then around money, and then like maybe we can make it more of a discussion. I realize it's been a monologue because I think so much about this.
That's so great.
But what to quote a friend of mine named John, money has us in the story that at the end of the day, each one of us has our own separate bank account. So no matter how much we connect, you have your bank account, I have my bank account. Even couples that have been married for 30 years, many of them have separate bank accounts. Money is enforcing separation, always. So when we start to see the degree to which we are held inside a prison of money, inside the story that it's my money and I'm going to hold it in my bank account and decide when to give it to you based on my own autonomy. And otherwise, I am identified with something that is supposed to be a flow. The money, like resources are supposed to flow. When I say I own this flow, it's like I own this bit of the river. That's ludicrous. So money is a lie at its root. And then the solution is to realize, collectively, not individually, that we are inside this lie, this toxic matrix run by money, and that we need each other for real. Like, we need to have our needs met, not because I have this resource that I can compel you to act for, but because you want to give. And slowly but surely, as more of us only want to give what feels true to give and receive what feels given freely, when we get into that space, then money loses its grip. So every time we connect with somebody because they want to give, and we receive because it feels true for us in that exchange, money has just lost a little bit of power. And every time we say, I really want to connect deeply with someone, so I will hire a therapist instead of finding somebody that really feels true to me and wants to give their time out of love, money has more and more power. And we are needing ultimately to unwind all of its power so that we can come back to the truer power, which is love, which wants to flow naturally, which is aligned with the highest good.
Oh my God. This is great. This is so great. And I'm glad you're speaking about this, because it's interesting for me. It's been like me and you were saying before we got on camera. My medicine work has, for many, many years, had a lot of really deep, I guess, healing to be done around money. And it's also been very complicated and confusing because I've always gotten a lot of these messages. I mean, especially lately, they've been, the messages that have been coming through are around just giving away money. And then I laugh because I'm like, well, I don't really have money to give away. So I don't even know where that's coming from. But it's this feeling of not even like, because I think I've gotten to that point, because I remember a few years ago where I had a shift in the awareness around my work that is just coming from my heart versus attaching to needing money. And I train myself. I've had to reprogram to remind myself to just trust that if I know I'm doing, my authentic, high integrity work and I'm enjoying it and it's really coming from this well within me and not from like have to or habitual, work, but really from like inspiration. Like if you ask my clients, I'm like, I go to all my client calls like excited. Like I love what I do. And the more I've just been in that place of loving and enjoying and like not almost like had to program myself to not worry about if the money's going to come or not. It has come. And it's like, you know, trying to just detach, but then it's still like this programming around, you know, the acceptance of money and pricing oneself and getting, you know, the price has been a big thing here in the psychedelic space, right? It's like, you know, there's something that came out recently about a girl charging $15,000 for mushroom sessions. And, you know, I tend to be of the, like, everybody's free to do whatever they want, you know, and like, who am I to say what's right or wrong? If someone has, you know, $10 million and wants to pay 15 grand for a 5-hour session, why not? But, you know, it's become this contention of, you know, like, what is right and what is wrong. And then, you know, someone recently I was with said, oh, I only do psychedelic therapy by donation. I don't ever ask for money. But he failed to mention that he had sold a company and like was living on probably 7 figures or more. And I'm like, you're leaving out a part of the story. So I'm curious, you know, when it comes to accepting money for, you know, therapeutic services or helping one another, you know, especially us in this kind of service-centered space where, yeah, that's all I do is like hold space and help people. And I love it. But, you know, and I have also noticed that if I charge less, I seem to get people who are less committed and less like willing to go all in. But the more I charge, I get people that are very committed and serious to transformation. So how do I make sense of that? And how do you find that you've made sense of pricing your services over the years?
I have gone through so many journeys on this. So what you're saying around commitment is often true, that money is a proxy for commitment, but you actually can choose commitment as the primary thing that you screen for in people coming. So when my favorite way of offering services, favorite by far, is to not accept a penny. Literally to say, you cannot pay me. We are removing money from this equation. It's not even pay what you want. It's, I am not going to take a penny from you. Because I feel a discomfort around the reduction of my gifts to a monetary value. So no matter what they do, I feel diminished by it. No matter what somebody gives me financially, I feel diminished by it inside a space where I'm offering my truest gifts. However, if I just say it's free, I'm going to get a bunch of people who are just out to take and are not at all interested or really committed because they're just grifters looking for something free. And that feels really crappy over here. So sometimes I will tell people the degree to which I want them to be committed. So maybe I make them spend a few hours writing an application. And then I really tune in to whether they're committed. And when I do that, what I get are people who don't have much money who can benefit tremendously from the work I have to offer. And so when you say money is a proxy for commitment, what is also happening is those people who can afford that higher price point are the ones that you're getting. And people who might be very committed but don't have the money have no way of demonstrating that commitment to you. But that's so hard to be with that I'm pricing people out who might really need it because money is my proxy for commitment. Then also, so that's my favorite is to not even let people pay, especially when I hold sacred space. And then I also need to get paid. I am not at a place where I can say, I don't have any money, or I have money, so I'll just do it by donation, like the guy with 7-figure companies. I have very little money at the moment, and I'm struggling financially, and I'm in debt, and it's hard. So what I have been praying for, and which occasionally happens, are people who really want to support what I'm doing, giving me money from their heart so that I can give my gifts away as gifts. That has been the most fulfilling energetic exchange. That's really a miracle when it happens. And I'm always welcoming more of it. Because that feels like the truest way to return money to the natural flow. So those folks who have significant resources, they are blocked. The money is serving as a block in their bodies. And as they unburden themselves of that block by giving their money away, not based on whichever nonprofit manages to trick them through their marketing that they have a worthy cause, that doesn't help. But instead, if they're following wealthy folks, if they're following their real, authentic, intuitive hit about where the money needs to go, like they're in their flow, they're returning it to the flow, and I happen to be a recipient of that flow, then I can take that and nourish myself in a completely uncompromising and beautiful way. And then I can serve folks without money being in the way of that exchange. And now that money has actually been turned into healing in a completely pure and clean way. That's my ideal flow. And in the meanwhile, I've tried everything. I've tried pay what you feel. I've tried pay what you can afford. I've tried sliding scale that I lay out everything. And I have found no solution that feels completely satisfactory. And I'm at the place where I'm ready to say there is no solution that is completely satisfactory.
I don't know if there is.
Yeah.
And also, what I find interesting, because I go through this and I have, I always justify everything by the fact that I have lots and lots and lots of free offers. And then I have many different scales. I have a range from, $40 or whatever it is, $57 to 5 figures, But what I have found as well, which is the one that kind of irks me the most, to be honest, is the people who it's very clear there's no financial, issue, and they have lots of money somehow, or whatever. Like maybe they have like a high-powered corporate job and own homes and blah, blah, blah. I've seen everything where then they're still like, oh, that's too much. Like, oh, $2,000 or, medicine space. Oh, $200. Oh, or now the medicine where I've been has increased from what used to be 200 to, let's say, 300 or even 400. There's a lot of that. Or even, this came up with a client, someone spending $4,000 for ketamine, but then doesn't want to pay for someone to actually help her process the ketamine therapy. And I was like, well, that's interesting. If they have $4,000 for the actual ketamine, but then they're not investing a dime into trying to make the ketamine more effective to help their condition. And that's, how do you explain that? Like people who are then just kind of, I always call it like, it's like that hoarding energy or that scarcity energy of like, I have a lot of money, but I think I don't. And maybe it's that core wounding of feeling unsafe. My dad went through this where I was raised feeling like I thought we were constantly on the verge of bankruptcy. That's the household I was raised in. And when I was 15 years old, my brother told me that we weren't broke. And I was like, what? And I remember being kind of shocked. I was like, oh. He had to explain to me that like dad has a job at this company and we're okay, but so it was really a deep process for me to go through, like, the last 25 years, 30 years to unpack that. But what do you think of that energy of like people who have tons of money and then they just, are don't want to pay for, like this, but then they'll pay for, the $2 million home?
So many thoughts. I've experienced it many times. It's one of the reasons I've gone away often from pay what is true for you, because I notice that people who don't have much money pay more than they can afford, and people who have a lot of money pay less, much, much less. So I've seen that pattern again and again. I've also seen many people say that they can't afford things when it's obvious that they can afford them. First, I just want to acknowledge how much enabling we do of that. So in some ways, folks who have a lot of resources are being enabled in their illusions by all of us who want those resources over and over again. And it's not completely on them. We often know that somebody is misleading us, but we don't want to say it because we want them to like us, because we want their money. So maybe somebody says like, oh, times are really tough for me. And how often do we say, really? Because I think I saw that you have a multi-million-dollar house and your husband is the CEO of a big company. So can you tell me what you mean by times are really tough? That's not aligning for me as true, is something very few of us say. And so these stories that many people of wealth are stuck in, they're stuck in because we sense their bullshit, but don't call them out. So it's on us too. But I think there can be a lot of different reasons why there's this artificial, quote unquote, scarcity. The first could be that maybe, like you said, in your family, there's this backlog of poverty trauma. And so no matter how much you have, spending money creates lots of anxiety. And the corollary to that I think is often true is that there is safety in having other people believe that you don't have a lot of money when you do. So a lot of people with a lot of money go through a lot of hoops to pretend like they don't have a lot of money to people who also don't have to people who actually don't have a lot of money. Because if it were clear the degree to which there is an imbalance, that tension would be unbearable. And then I want to share something. One more example of this that really moved me is one of the people in my life who does have a significant amount of money and who has generously, lovingly given me fair amounts of money in order to do the work that I've been describing. Bless her heart. I did an event where I wouldn't let these women pay for the events. It was a total gift. And then these women wanted to thank my friends. And so they sent my friends anonymously some messages. My friend who funded it, let's call her the philanthropist, funded it. She wanted to remain anonymous. And these women who received it, let's call them the participants, wanted to thank her. And so the participants sent these beautiful messages thanking the philanthropist for having funded this work that they benefited from. And I was talking to the philanthropist about how it felt to receive the thank yous. And her answers were confusing to me. She's like, yeah, it was nice and it felt good. And I said, I don't get it. I read those messages and they were like, this was one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever felt. Thank you so much. This means the world to me. And so I said, why aren't you receiving that? Like, what is the block, philanthropist, to receiving the depth of the gratitude that these women feel for what your money made possible? And bless this philanthropist's heart, she dug in and she came out with the true answer. She said, if I let in the degree of gratitude that these women feel, and if I acknowledge the incredible change my money has made in their lives, then I have to face how little change I am making with my money. I have to face that I have millions of dollars accumulating interest, that small fractions of which could create life-changing shifts in people with a lot less money. And I am not prepared to feel that pain and feel that truth. So I have to shut out the gratitude coming my way so I don't feel the gap. And so I think that's what's driving a lot of the avoidance among people who have a lot of money, is because it is impossible psychologically to be in the truth of how much good and change that money could do and also continue to hoard it.
Oh my God. We got to get this episode to Jeff Bezos. Because I've always wondered what it's like. Have you ever seen that Wealth to Scale? Did you ever see that website that guy made?
No.
It came out at the beginning of the pandemic. I'll send it to you. It's still up. It's amazing. I highly recommend this for everybody. It's called Wealth to Scale. I think it should still come up. It's a graphic of the scale of wealth on the planet. And it's literally like GDPs of some countries and then like certain human beings, and you can't even scroll. I mean, it takes like 10 minutes to scroll to certain people's wealth. And it's like, I mean, people have named this like, wow, there's some humans that could actually just fix poverty or like fix all these problems if they just gifted it out. But, I don't know what it's like, to have that level of money where, wow, maybe you could change like a whole entire country, like let's say the United States alone, like the experience of poverty here for every human being. But I don't know, it's kind of like that, what we all started with, what you mentioned, like the power, the control,
Well, I think when you're talking about somebody like Bezos or really deeply committed capitalists, there is a knowing that the resolution of poverty is the end of their system of control. So the only way, the only way that capitalism in its current incarnation can thrive is if we are all in the perpetual low-level fear that we are going to be plunged into poverty and death. And it is from that fear that people work $15 an hour, $20 an hour, or maybe even making $100,000 or $200,000 a year trying to pay for college and their kids. Without that fear, there is no profit accumulation. And so those people who have tremendous amounts of resources and who could theoretically band together and end that fear would be giving up the essence of the power that they used in order to accumulate those resources to begin with. So the sociopathy is quite endemic to the system that they have triumphed in.
Wow. Yeah. And this is something I want to, I've struggled with that. I mean, I've spent whole ceremonies crying over capitalism. And then there's this part of me that's like, well, capitalism's here and I love it. And I love money. And it's this holding both the polarities. And I love what you just said, committed capitalists. I've never heard that said that way, but it's so true. It's like, and it's so accepted and normal in this system. But then I'm constantly
from a shamanic
being
perspective, it's demonic.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I'm also then being shown for many, many years, this whole system that I think on a cellular level, I do believe maybe not most, I don't know, who am I to speak for everybody and project onto them, but I do feel that we know this isn't working. It's like people are burnt out. People are trying to keep up. I just spoke to a client out in Southern California who's like, there's no community. There's nothing here because everybody's just busy trying to like get things and, Teslas and nice homes. And it's just this it's like the literal rat race. And it's not sustainable for our bodies and our health and our nervous systems and, and the human connection. And I've talked about this in the psychedelic space where there's then, the mainstream media, well, psychedelics will cure your depression or cure your anxiety. And I'm like, but it's not. No. It's just, that's like another mask. And I'm like, we're not getting to the actual problems with the whole system that are causing the depression, anxiety in the first place. And that's where my prayer is that, okay, well, maybe if they're turning to, I don't know, like mushroom sessions or ayahuasca or even MDMA or ketamine, maybe then there will be something that wakes up and says, oh, maybe my depression's from this, keeping up with the Joneses rat race where I'm working 60 hours a week just to be able to pay the mortgage and my Tesla bill, and maybe then there's, some larger scale awareness. And like, I keep being shown this mantra that is just stop the bullshit. Like, that's it. It's like, I think there's going to be a day where everybody just says, we got to stop the bullshit. But I don't know. Maybe this is a dream. Maybe it's just, an archetype of the whole system collapsing that I think a lot of people are kind of wanting to see on some level. But I don't know. Like, do you have that happen? Like, does this kind of dream of having it all just crumble and collapse one day, like, does that come through you often?
Yes. All the time. Although I think I have a slight variation on stop the bullshit. I'm with you on it. That feels true. I want the bullshit to stop. I have dreams of people waking up and realizing that it's bullshit. But I think it's probably not exactly bullshit, meaning that these forces that we're up against are not bullshit. They are dark and thoughtful in the sense of strategic and extremely powerful. And they are in control largely of what is happening. And so when you say it's not working for humans. It's not working on behalf of the planet. It's not working on behalf of connection. It's not working in that sense, but that's not its purpose. So I think what we have to see too is that it is working. Capitalism is working in its endless desire to turn absolutely everything into capital. So capitalism seeks to turn everything into capital or into profit or into money. Money itself seeks to turn everything into money. And in that sense, it's working really, really, really well. And so when we say it's not working, we're operating on the assumption that people want to be in connection with themselves, with each other, with the planet. And there's a degree to which that is true, but we're not yet reckoning with the degree to which it isn't true. And what is moving through these systems is not any of that. There is something much more powerful that is in charge, that it is incumbent upon us to eventually face. So it's like saying I want it to collapse, which I have that desire too, is also a way of avoiding facing what is doing it. It's its own kind of bypass.
Yeah.
Like, what is running Jeff Bezos's psyche is a real question. And what is running the psyches of all of the people around him who are enabling him? And what is running the philanthropic sector? And how much is money, power, status, ego, all of that, these driving forces. And so it's not so much that I want it to collapse, it's that I want the teenager in me wants it all to collapse because I want them all to see how fucked up it is, and I want, the world to emerge from all of their bullshit and be like, look at that, we did. But I'm actually seeing that that's probably not the most mature part of me. It's definitely not the shaman in me. What I see in shamanic spaces is most of the time for us to work through our bullshit, we have to confront the nature of that bullshit so that we can integrate the wound that allowed us to be run by that bullshit.
I hope that's the title of your new book right there. That's a great...
And so what is the wound what are these wounds, and can we face that we're driven by wounds all the time, and that these wounds have been hijacked by these demonic forces, and that these demonic forces blind us to them, and that money is one of the great perpetuators of these demonic forces that live in all of our shadows. Can we step into that truth together and say, I don't know how to get through this on my own because it's got all of us, but can we hold hands and be like, okay, we're going to stop now, or we're going to try, or we're going to flail and bounce around to try to be in what's real, no matter how hard it is.
Oh my God. This is amazing. This has been very deep. I want to bring you back and just do another long conversation getting deeper into the money. But
Great.
Maybe when your book is ready. And by the way, before we go, tell people what do you have coming up over the next 6 to 12 months? Where can people find you?
You can find me on my website. Listen to this change in tone, actually, like where I was, and then saying the word website. Right. I don't want to just disown that disconnection. Like, you can find me on my website. I'm maybe in a higher realm. It's not that you can find me on our website. You can find me through tuning into yourself, and then there's a part of you that might want to connect, and then you'll find your way to me if that feels aligned. That would be like the higher dimensional website. In the meanwhile, I have a normal one. It's my name.com, davidsauvage.com, and you can see events. And I am since we're on the topic of money, I am really interested in collaborating with people who felt what I said and have access to a lot of money. I would love to help you open that channel, or if that channel is opened, help you flow it forth in the most amount of integrity possible. And I work with people doing that. What else? You can buy my book, Healing Heals the Healer too, which is about my journey. Yeah, reach out if you felt me. I will read all the emails and respond to some of them.
Awesome. Yeah, and I subscribe to your email list and do read your updates and some of your writing and things you publish, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I have a mailer, a newsletter that goes out once or twice a month. So if you just go to my website and put your email in, that's the best way to keep in my flow.
Awesome. Yeah, and by the way, and I know you do events in the New York area because I see them once in a while. So for those of you who are coming to New York or live in New York, we kind of, David and I kind of live near each other.
Yeah.
I mean, relatively close.
Yeah, and I do sessions in the Hudson Valley too. So if you happen to be near the town of Hudson, I do occasional one-on-one sessions and can be really, really deep work.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this is given me a lot to process. This is the perfect podcast interview to come back to after my few weeks offline in Peru. This felt like a good integration for me.
Yay.
It's like, whoa.
Yay.
And it's such a great discussion and so needed these days. But David, thank you so much for being here. And we'll have your links right here in the show notes. Anybody, please reach out to him, ask any questions, and we'll bring you back in and get deeper into this another time.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.